Bit of a darkish afternoon, Sunday here in Wesel, Germany, but I want to test out those two here, the Mate 80 Pro Max against the Honor Magic 8 Pro. So you can see that both of them originate from one company. They have the same kind of language in terms of their design, but it's a bit of unique what they chose here. The large Mate against a smaller kind of Magic. Design change that Honor did for this generation. You can see the camera specifications on screen. Technically they have almost the same kind of sensors there for the main, but the periscope solution is a different one. One periscope, large sensor and large megapixel versus two smaller sensors, but two periscope sensors with different zoom levels and a good ultra wide angle that is almost the same. And then we have some front facing shooters as well. Both have 3D face detection, which is a bit of unique on those here, but yeah, we will check out the front-facing videos first. Front-facing video on both. We have 0.8 and wide. I think the Huawei is a bit wider than the Honor there. We have 1x and 1x magnification there. We have autofocus, but only on the Huawei, where the Honor doesn't feature any autofocus, which is a bit of a bummer. What do you think about the colors here? The Honor seems to be a bit more natural, the Huawei a bit warmed up. How good is the microphone quality? I'm probably using the Huawei because it has a better mics. But yeah, you decide what you think, which one is performing better in this situation here. Outdoors, a bit dim lit situation. Main camera sensors. On paper, same sensor size. Which one is performing better here for the main camera vlogging style video? What do you think? Which one is better here? 4K 30, 4K 60 frames per second, but the Honor can also do 4K 120 frames per second, but lacks 8K recording. So what do you think about this one here? Which one is performing better in your opinion? And let's try the ultra wide angle on both. It's a bit of a dim lit situation. You can see the lights are turned on already, so I don't think I have to do a night video here on both. So which one is wider? On paper it should be the Honor with 1mm wider, 12 instead of like 13 that we have on the Huawei. But you be the judge. Which one is wider here? Because stabilization is added, of course, and such things. So which one is performing better in your opinion? And how good is the mic quality on both of them? And now a little zoom test. We are on the ultra wide angle right now next to a busy street. As you see here, we want to go to 2x directly. So this is 2x, animation's quite nice here, 3.7x here and 4x here. And then we can go directly to 10x on the Huawei, where the Honor, I have to zoom and dial in 10x manually, that we reached now. Both overblown, the highlight there for sure. Can we go in further? This is like 15 times maximum that we have on the Honor. Now it's compensating and both are readable. I can get a bit further, like 30x here. It's still readable on the Huawei. It's a bit of a shame that I cannot go any further on the Honor. And yeah, which one is performing better in your opinion? Let's go back to 1x maybe. Which one is better in terms of animations there? Maybe go to something like this here. Directly to 10x here. And we go 3.7 and then 10x here. On paper it should be the Honor that is a bit clearer, a bit better. But RYOB sensor is helping for the dark and compensating, but the Honor is definitely more stable. Which one is performing better there? 15x now. And we can go to 15x as well here. Yeah, which one is better? Very hard to tell, these conditions. Let's go back to the ultra wide angle. And let's move around a little bit. So see how good stabilization is here on the ultra wide angle on both, especially in this lower light situation. So which one do you prefer? I have to say, on paper it should be the Honor. On screen right now it looked like that they are almost on par, with a slight edge maybe towards the Huawei's in terms of brightness, but I think it's also smoothing out a little bit more. So the Honor, I think, has a slight edge there in zoom capabilities, but the rest, maybe Huawei. So we start off with some photos. I have only a few photos in daylight, even though they are mostly indoors here because it was raining. But we start off with the telezoom because I think it's very important to figure out which one has the better telezoom. We have the larger sensor definitely on the Huawei. You can see that the Huawei is doing a little bit more of editing. So it is polishing everything up. So the little dust particles are not so visible as on the Honor there.
And the background as well seems to be a bit more cleaned up on the Huawei, so it is denoising heavily, but it also has a little bit more of details, especially you can see it here, Honkai Star you can read, but here it is a bit harder to read. So this is definitely something that I noticed. And the same goes for here. The optimization is a little bit better on the Huawei there, and it is a bit clearer. So yes, the telezoom lens is definitely something where the Huawei is winning. Even here as well, with a bit of more light, you see how much more, yeah, first of all, blurriness that's coming in with 1/25th of a second. This one also 1/25th of a second, but it's a lot sharper there. So even though we have this 6.5 stops compensation with the OIS now, it seems to be a bit shaky or blurry, or it's just not optimizing so much. It keeps more noise in for sure, and the Huawei has a bit more detail that you can read everything, even though it is a bit edited for sure, but it's harder here on the Honor. This one readable. Here again, it looks like some kind of blurriness going on there. And then we have 30x zoom on both, because the Mate 80 Pro Max has 24mm by default and the Magic 8 Pro 23. We have this discrepancy here, 690 and 720. But nevertheless, if you take a look at the detail levels, you can clearly see again, it's sharper, it's more sharpened up for sure, more edited. It appears to be more detail here on the Honor in comparison what the Huawei is doing, where it's cleaning everything up. But I'm not sure, because the Honor is also doing AI, if the AI is inventing stuff there. If you have to choose, this one looks less promising, less 3D-like. Here it's looks like one piece of blob there to melt it with the background, where here you can have a little bit of a 3D effect still. So yes, I would pick the Huawei here as a winner for the telephoto lens for sure. And then just attempt for portrait photography in a mirror here a bit, but not using portrait mode. You can see that we have a way lower shutter speed there on the Huawei than on the Honor, with a way higher shutter speed. And also the ISO is way higher there on actually not shutter speed. Shutter speed's way lower here. The ISO is way higher on the Magic. However, I think the Magic looks a bit more natural there and a little bit more detailed, where here it's like, ooh, colors are wrong and I look a little bit like a wax figure. Not so pleasant for sure. But let's deep dive into the portraits. When it comes to the portrait mode, they are very similar, even though I cannot control the virtual aperture on the Magic 8 Pro in its hardcore portrait mode. You see that the highlight control is a bit better on the Huawei. It is a bit more warmed up, and the Magic 8 Pro, it's a bit less warm. You can also see it here in the background already. That's much warmer there on the Mate 80 Pro Max. The cutouts are quite nice. Here with the 2x crop on both, both have a 101.3, roughly 101.3 inch sensor. It's like 101.28 inch, I think, on the Huawei, and 101.3 on the Honor. You see that the Honor looks a bit more edited, like my eyebrows redrawn and you clearly sharpened up, and it's too dark now. It's the opposite of what we had in the previous shot. We have a bit too dark hair as well, where we have much warmer colors and much more blonde-like color, like it actually is on the Huawei. So the Huawei is a bit more natural here in this regard. But it's not always the case that the Honor is losing against the Huawei. Here I think both are doing a bit too much in terms of redrawn the eyebrows there, and I think here the colors are very similar. And here the eyes are redrawn definitely on the Huawei, and it looks a bit off. Where the Honor with the eyes looks a bit better, but the redrawn eyebrows a bit worse, but still better than what the Huawei is doing there at 96 versus, what is it here, 85 millimeters, And then we have another comparison with the Honor being at 170 millimeter, which is the maximum that we can do here on the Honor. You can see it struggles a lot, but it is a bit of a clear kind of shot, where the Huawei, it looks like motion blur happening at 1/33 of a second, the same as the Honor has here, but the Honor keeps it a bit more real, where it's a bit of more blurry there, and it's, I think, motion blur. I'm not sure what else it could be. again, the very heavily edited, redrawn eyes and eyebrows, where the Honor is also doing this, but keeps it blurry there. Again, a bit warmer. The Huawei can also go 10x portrait shot, but it's not getting better, and the eyebrows redrawn becomes even more evident. So it has some issues there with its second telephoto sensor, the Mate 80 Pro Max. And here I think the Magic 8 Pro is a little bit better. But all in all, in terms of portraits, I think because sometimes the Mate 80 Pro Max is a little bit better than the Magic 8 Pro. I like the warmth sometimes a little bit better and the colors. Other times the Magic 8 Pro is just doing too much with redrawing eyebrows consistently, where the Mate 80 Pro Max is looking a bit better. I think all in all, pretty much identical there. If I have to choose one, probably still will go with the Mate 80 Pro Max, not so much with the Magic, because the Magic is just doing too much editing, and with the Mate 80 Pro Max I will stick to the 96mm and will not go beyond that actually for the portraits. And actually with the Magic 8 Pro I could go beyond that, but I really don't want to, because if I have to crop in, we have this highly edited kind of picture, which I really don't like. What really fascinates me with the night shots or the dim lit situation shots is how much sharpening the Magic 8 Pro applies for all the shots, but at the same time keeps in tons of noise. And you can see it here on the ultra wide angle already. Ultra wide angle is a bit wider on the Honor, 12mm versus 30mm. You can clearly see it here on the edge. But when I go to details, you can see how much more natural the Huawei looks like in comparison to the Honor. The Honor is like over sharpening at the same time keeping in more noise, so this creates noise artifacts and sharpening, oppo sharpening artifacts, where the Huawei is doing the opposite. It's like denoising a lot of stuff, and sometimes details are getting lost. But here in this case it kept a little bit more noise in, which gives it a bit more of an edge there. So overall, I like the Huawei here a little bit better than the over sharpened mess on the Magic 8 Pro in the ultra wide angle. When it comes to the selfies, I think they're on par, but here in this particular reason, the Huawei managed to make it motion blur, so it is very unsharp there, where the Honor keeps it sharp. But in general, I think they're on par with the shots. All the other shots that I did were basically identical there. The main camera sensor, however, it's a bit warmer on the Huawei, what you can see here, of course. And again, we have a bit more noise kept in on the Honor, where the Huawei denoises heavily. But here, look at what the Honor is doing with the lines. They're not straight anymore, and they have a little bit of this weird moiré almost like pattern there. The rest, like HDR, looks pretty identical, but at the same time it keeps more noise in on the Honor. So I'm a bit disappointed by the Honor's main camera sensor, because the Huawei is really doing a very good job there. Why is that the case? We have RYOB technology on the Huawei, but also a larger aperture, variable aperture, f1.4 versus f1.6, and you can clearly see where the advantages lie. You can distinguish the bush from the house in the background, where here it's one black mess on the Magic. So there's a huge difference. There's also a bit of noise going on already on the Magic, and here everything is nice and sharp. It's a bit over sharpened maybe on the Huawei as well, but the Huawei keeps it better here for sure. And then when it comes to the telesensor, it's basically the opposite. The Honor is keeping more noise in for sure, has a bit of denoising, a bit of sharpening again, a bit there, and the Huawei is denoising everything, and it looks like almost painted here. And details, you look at the little, those little antennas there, are simply lost on the Huawei, which is a bit of a bummer. So the Huawei heavily denoising, and the Honor keeping a bit more sharpness and details thanks to more noise. And the same goes for this 30x zoom. Look how much sharpening there's applied, the white outline, but how much detail there's also left, because the Huawei is making it crystal clear here, but it's losing the detail because it's painting all over the place there. And which one you prefer that in this case? The both, you can see it here as well, like the stairs that are still visible a bit here are almost gone here because the Huawei is repainting everything. So, and also little antennas gone from the Huawei shot. So I think, yes, the Huawei looks more clean, but it's not better because it's losing details here massively. And this is something that I don't like. So I would take the Magic 8 Pro here with a slight win for the telezoom lens. But the Magic is not flawless, even though it has the larger sensor. In this case, for example, even though we have very low shutter speeds, the night mode works a bit better on the Huawei, where everything's nice and sharp and detailed, no motion blur, where we have motion blur introduced on the Honor shot here. which is a bit of a cumbersome thing, but the Honor still has a bit of better HDR, as you see here. This yellow light there, the distinguishing between two yellow or orangey lights, and the background there is not so much or not so well as the one with the Huawei. So the Huawei has some issues there. It's not the best, and you can also clearly see it here maybe in the background as well, how they do it with the shades there closed. Both very, very close, but I would still prefer the Honor, that technically should win easily against the Mate. Then the main camera sensor again cropped into 35mm on both, also shows first of all a bit more warmish color on the Magic. That might be the warmish light there in the background, but also how much more edited it looks like. So we have more noise, and we have like tons of like not natural looking face here, where it's redrawing eyebrows and so on, where the Huawei looks like it has a larger sensor, even that it can capture so much detail, and it's much more natural looking than what the Honor can do here at the 35mm range. So in total, I think the main camera sensor is better on the Mate 80 Pro Max. It is not on a 1-inch type level yet, but I think it's very, very good here, and it's beating the Magic 8 Pro. The ultra wide angle as well, but the tele is a win for the Magic 8 Pro, where even though the Mate 80 Pro Max has two tele sensors, I think at night especially, the larger sensor on the Magic 8 Pro keeps in more details, where the Huawei is just like denoising the hell out of the shots and loses a lot of detail there. Ranking and conclusion, TLDR, the Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max gets a score of 9.4, where the Honor Magic 8 Pro gets a score of 9.3. So we have a winner here with the Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max. It's not by much. You can also see the scoring points here, 4.721 versus 4.648, so very, very close. Where do we see the main difference? It's the main camera sensor that's better on the Huawei, especially when you crop in, but even if you don't crop in, especially at low light, RYYB, variable aperture, is just winning on the Huawei. It's so much more detailed there and better with low light. The ultra wide angle almost on par, but it's slightly better there on the Huawei with 8.7 instead of 8.6, because the Honor is just so atrociously banging the picture with leaving noise in, at the same time over sharpening, and this is just not a good combination. And even though we have a bit of a narrower field of view on the Mate 80 Pro Max, it's looking much better and nicer with the ultra wide angle. The zoom performance, however, is a bit of a different game. Both score the same points, 9.7 here, but the actual score points are a bit of a difference. The zoom performance on the Honor Magic 8 Pro, thanks to its larger sensor, 101.4, 4.87 points. With the Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max is pretty good there, but just 4.85 points, so slightly bit worse the Mate 80 Pro Max. Two dual tele sensors, because they are smaller, and what the Huawei tends to do is like denoise the hell out of the shots, so there's not a lot of noise in, using tons of AI to sharpen and reshaping everything there. But sometimes the Mate 80 Pro Max, especially when it comes to lower light, gives you more consistent shots, where the Honor Magic 8 Pro keeps tons of noise in and it's doing tons of sharpening at the same time, which leads to bit of more detailed pictures for sure, and the larger sensor should provide you with better pictures, but the AI is just not very good on the Honor. This is why it's so close between those two, but yes, the Honor is winning there. Video recording is a big win for the Huawei. You saw it, how disastrous the selfie stabilization was on the Honor Magic 8 Pro. I don't know what's going on there in this lower light situation, but also the ultra wide angle performance in this lower light situation, or even with brighter situations, is just much better on the Mate 80 Pro Max. Switching between lenses is much smoother between them. We sometimes have like a stuck or hiccup on the Honor Magic, which is a little bit of a distraction. And then when it comes to tele as well, I was surprised, even though we have the better sensor on the Honor Magic 8 Pro, how much better the Mate 80 Pro Max is doing there. Except for the stabilization, because here the Honor Magic really has an ace up its sleeve, because it's very stable, one of the most stable smartphones that I can use for videography for long-range zooms, where the rest, however, is just better, brighter, less noisy, less over-sharpened on the Huawei, more natural looking on the Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max through all the lenses and the switching and Also the stabilization being better there on the Mate 80 Pro Max. So yes, the Mate 80 Pro Max is taking the crown for video recording there for sure. Portraits, very close. Both get the same points here because it's like, yes, the Honor Magic is consistent, but it's consistently recreating eyebrows, sharpening the faces, having a bit of noise in there. Where the Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max is a bit of a mixed bag. I think they have to update it still. Sometimes it has fantastic colors and looking natural. Other times, especially with the longer zoom ranges that it offers, it's just simply blurry because of motion blur. At the same time tries to recreate eyebrows, which is looking not so great. And sometimes it fails also a bit with the colors there. So where it's where the main camera sensor is cropping in like to 50 or 48 millimeters that they have. It's looking fantastic. It's blowing out the Magic 8 Pro out of the water thanks to the better main camera sensor. The portraits are falling apart when you go to the second tele sensor. The first one is still on par with the Honor Magic 8 Pro, but the second one is the big issue there on the Mate 80 Pro Max, especially when it comes to indoor shots where it struggles a little bit. Selfies, however, same points. Yes, in my examples, the Mate 80 Pro Max struggled a little bit where with the motion blur issue, slower shutter speed, but the detail levels are almost on par. The autofocus I really like on the Mate 80 Pro Max, and the camera samples and other selfies that I shot looking basically identical between those two. So yes, they get the same points for the selfie. Camera UI is a win for the Magic 8 Pro. It's much easier now with the new camera UI. Just swipe up with one hand and can change settings. You have, for example, and I'm always bringing this example until Huawei fixes it, the timer thing. Well, Honor did fix this because, you know, they were once one company using the same software base, but they fixed it. You have a possibility, you go to portrait mode, you want to take a portrait of yourself, you just put your phone on the tripod, you choose timer, set 5 seconds, and that's it. All in the one layer of the camera UI. On the Huawei, you have to go to a second layer or even third layer to choose the timer, and then the timer is sticking forever there, and you don't even see it, and sometimes you want to shoot, and then there's a timer. Anyway, so I hope that Huawei will fix that camera UI issue there. And also it's not very friendly for one-hand usage. However, in terms of extra features, the Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max is a little bit ahead of the Honor Magic 8 Pro in certain conditions when it comes to certain extra features. Like, for example, the possibility to tweak manually your filters, color filters that you have. The Honor, on the other side, has the ability to take some photo and extract a color out of it and then use that for its photography, which is a very good feature. This is why they're so close together there. But the Huawei has a bit of an edge there because you can tweak it later on a little bit more, which I really like there on the Huawei side for that matter. So yeah, we have a winner here. How does it end up in the ranking? Here you can see the Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max is ranked number 5, where the Honor Magic 8 Pro is ranked number 8. So they are pretty close there together. What are the neighbors there? For the Huawei, it's the Oppo Find X8 Ultra, which is very close there with 9.5 score instead of 9.4. It has a bit of an edge when it comes to the main camera sensor. It is a bit worse on the ultra wide angle, but it's better, much better there on the zoom. Not much better, it's a bit better there on the zoom. And videography is on par, which is quite interesting. We have a bit of a better portrait shots for the Oppo Find X8 Ultra, and the selfie also seems to be a bit better there. UI wise, almost on par. Actually, not almost, it is on par there, UI and extra features wise. The Oppo also still has a lot of things to do. The Vivo X300 Pro we have here. Yes, it is below the Huawei Mate 80 Pro Max. How can that happen? The ultra wide angle being worse on the X300 Pro. Not the zoom being almost on par, being a bit better there even. The main camera sensor is a bit worse than the Mate 80 Pro Max. If you look at the points there, the scoring is the same. And yes, the portraits are a lot better on the X300 Pro. The selfies is where the X300 Pro is falling flat on its knees, which is a bit of a mixed bag kind of score here. And UI-wise and the extra-wise, it is better for sure. So the X300 Pro being almost on par with the Mate 80 Pro Max. And then we have the Vivo X100 Ultra, and then already comes the Magic 8 Pro. You can see the Vivo X100 Ultra, very strong 7th place, so even winning against the Honor Magic here, which is quite interesting with the better main camera sensor for sure. We have a 1-inch type sensor there. It's not blowing the Magic out of the water when it comes to the ultra-wide angle, but also when it comes to the zoom, it is better than the Honor Magic 8 Pro. And this says a lot about where Honor's issue still lies, where they have to work. It's very close, I have to say, but they still have to work on it. And the same goes for video. Video is like one of the biggest problems of the Magic 8 Pro. If it would have better video, then it could easily beat the Vivos here, or be at least on par with the X300 Pro. But this is just a bit of an issue there for sure. And the same goes for the portraits. The portraits are just not good. I don't like the Honor's portraits. They're improving for sure, but they're not at the same level. Where it's winning against the Vivo is selfie cam. Vivo has always historically not the best selfie cams there. And UI-wise, yes, UI-wise they're on par, but feature-wise the Vivo is definitely a big winner. So yes, Xiaomi 15 Ultra being under the Magic 8 Pro, how is that even possible? Has a better main camera sensor, however has a way weaker ultra-wide angle, and which is quite interesting, it has a weaker zoom camera there. Yes, it has 2 zoom cameras, and on paper it should be on the same par with the Magic 8 Pro when it comes to zoom, but in reality it's an issue. The first zoom camera is too small, so in lower light situations it's failing, and the second one would be better, but then the processing is a bit worse. That might have changed with the 15 Ultras after some updates, but I didn't have the chance to try the 15 Ultra with the newest updates there, so it is what it is here right now. It has, however, the better portraits for sure than the Honor, more consistent, better video as well. This is where the Honor really fails a little bit there. Selfie, however, is not so great on the 15 Ultra. This is where Honor is doing a bit better. So this is my ranking. If you have some comments, put them down below. Until the next time. Bye.